Good morning, everyone. And it is a good morning indeed, because we have a cause to celebrate, not only because it's Take Your Son and Daughter to Work a Day, welcome, nice to see you, but because earlier this month, the Department of Labor unveiled a final rule that will protect and strengthen the retirement security and competence of millions of Americans. The Conflict of Interest Retirement Investment Rule, also known as the Fiduciary Rule. Hardworking Americans should be able to trust their financial advisor to protect their retirement future, but that's not always been the case. Conflicted advice, well, I won't go into it. Let's just talk on the positive side as to where we are. Senator Perez led an extensive, inclusive, and comprehensive public input process that created this greatly improved final rule. Thousands of public comments, days of public hearings, hundreds of stakeholder meetings, and more than 100 congressional meetings with Secretary Perez and his team. I just said to our colleagues there, let him be a model to us in having the openness to listen to other ideas, to have the brilliance to recognize a good thing when you see it, and the humility to embrace a solution that you might not have ever thought of yourself. And listening to our colleagues, bringing in what the impact, what the ramification is of a particular rule on the private sector is very, very important for us to know. And so the Secretary told us he listened, he learned, and came up with a better rule and a smarter rule, and that is cause for celebration. However, today Republicans are voting on a special interest resolution to block the rule and upend our progress. Republicans are trying to protect, well, we won't go into them. Let's just stick with us. We're very, very honored to have worked on many fronts with the Secretary of Labor. It is Take Your Son to Work Day for him, Raphael. His son is with him, and I would have said those remarks even if Raphael were not here about his very distinguished father. So I yield the podium to him with gratitude and admiration. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Leader Pelosi, and thank you to all of my friends who are here this morning. I want to thank you for your leadership and partnership throughout this process. This process has been about fortifying one of the principal pillars of middle-class security, which is retirement security. When you work hard and play by the rules, you are entitled to retire with dignity in this nation. The retirement landscape has changed. In the Ozzie and Harriet era of my parents, you worked 30, 35 years at the same job, and you retired, and you had a pen, a party, and a defined benefit pension. And that pension lasted for your lifetime. And you didn't have to worry about how to invest it because somebody else did it for you. In today's world of $13 trillion now in IRAs and 401ks, the retirement landscape has changed dramatically. And now workers have to make critical decisions about how to invest their money. And I am a lawyer, and all of my siblings are doctors. And I've always said that 3 of the most important decisions you make in life are medical, legal, and financial. And when you go to a lawyer and a doctor, you have a right to expect that that lawyer or doctor has a legal obligation to put your best interest first. But that is not the case with seeking financial advice. And as the Council of Economic Advisors pointed out, the effect of conflicted advice, at a minimum, is $17 billion a year. This is $17 billion of hard-earned money that should be going into the pockets of consumers. And the problem that we identified is that there is a structural imbalance. The system is broken. The incentives were not aligned so that an advisor could, consistent with the so-called suitability standard, steer a customer to a product that gave the advisor more return at the expense of the consumer. That is not right. I don't go to a doctor when I have cancer and ask him or her what's suitable for me. I want to know what's best for me. I want to know what's going to save my life. And so we embarked on a long journey, and we went very deliberately because we understood that there were a lot of complicated questions. We built a very big table. We built a very inclusive table. And we approached the enterprise of rulemaking with a healthy dose of inclusiveness and humility. And we put a proposed rule out. And we heard from a lot of stakeholders, stakeholders in the industry, consumer stakeholders, members of Congress. And every single time we met with someone from Congress, Congressman Neal, Congressman Scott, Congressman Delaney, Leader Pelosi, Chairwoman Waters, Whip Hoyer, Congressman Hoyer, Leader Hoyer. Everybody we heard from made us smarter and made the final rule better. And what we heard was, we agree with your North Star, and our North Star was an enforceable best interest standard. And the final rule does something that's very simple. The marketing materials of companies say we put our clients' best interest first. And now we're saying in the final rule, it's not simply a slogan, it's the law. And that's what we're doing. And because of that inclusive process, I've been very heartened in the aftermath by the conversations we've had with industry stakeholders. What we've heard most frequently is the Department of Labor listened. And that's because we did listen. And the input we got made it a better rule. This is a good day for Main Street. This is a good day for people who are saving for retirement. Not only the 65-year-old couple who's on the verge of retirement, but the 22-year-old millennial. Because yesterday's generation, my father's generation, worked 35 years in the same job. Today's generation, 35 years may mean 35 gigs. And every time you go from one gig to the next, you may have a 401k or an IRA, and you have a decision to make. And what we're saying to you, whether you're 22 or whether you're 62 or 72 or somewhere in between, you now have a right, a legally enforceable right, to ensure that your best interests are being served just like you do when you go to a lawyer and a doctor. And that is why this is an important day for the middle class. I believe that this is one of the most important things that this administration can do to protect retirement security, to fortify that pillar. And that is why President Obama has said forcefully that if this resolution were to come to his desk, he will veto it. Not might veto it, he will veto it. So this is frankly a waste of time today, what the Republicans are doing. And what they should be doing is working with average Americans to help make sure that they can save for retirement. They should be listening to people in the industry who have said to us, you listen to us. And they should be working with us. This is a good day, again, for Main Street. And I'm proud to be here. And I want to say again, thank you for your rock-solid support. Thank you on behalf of the President. Thank you on behalf of the Department of Labor and the dedicated career professionals who worked on it. But most importantly, Leader, thank you on behalf of the American people who work hard and play by the rules and simply want a dignified retirement. And this rule will now bring us into the 21st century of regulation, making sure that the modern family universe of defined contribution plans and IRAs is now reflected in our regulatory scheme. So thank you so much for the work that you've done, the partnership that you have been with us on throughout this process. I am so critically and eternally grateful for the work. Thanks for making us smarter. I can always use that. And with that, let me turn it to Congressman Hoyer from the great state of Maryland.
There you go. We're fellow Marylanders, so we have a kinship. Raphael, welcome. We're glad to have you here, and we're very proud of your dad. You know, I say that the difference between my party and the other party is we believe we're in this together, and they say you're on your own. Here's another example of we're going to vote on a bill which says you're on your own. We're not going to protect and make sure that your best interests are uppermost in the minds of those whom you seek advice from. We believe that we're in this together. We believe, as Secretary Perez has said, that we need to make sure that all of us are acting in the best interests of our people, and particularly financial institutions, because it's so critically important to the future and to the security of our people that when they seek advice, they can be confident that people are acting on their best interest. I want to thank Richie Neal, who has worked very hard with Secretary Perez, with members of Congress, with the financial sector, to get this to a place. To get this to a place where I have not heard from anybody opposed to this except the Republicans. This is a perfect example of a group that is not willing to take yes for an answer. Secretary Perez has worked, he's listened, and he's, as Richie Neal is going to say,
You're pretty confident.
I am confident. Well, you just said it. I presume you're going to stay pretty consistent. And every member of the caucus that got up, who was very involved in this, heard from consumers, heard from interest groups, heard from the financial sector community, got up in the whip meeting today and said, this is a positive result for everybody. And this resolution ought to be rejected, hopefully unanimously by our side, but it ought to be rejected unanimously by their side and recommit to a proposition that we are in this together and we're going to protect your interest, the people's interest, the investors' interest, the retirees' interest, and yes, that millennial's interest. So thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. And now I want to turn it over to somebody who's been a real giant in this process. Success is partly his to claim, Richie Neal.
Thanks, Stenny. Just some quick comments about the Congress I signed up for in 1988. This is the way it once worked. And remember that we all always wanted to get to the same corner of the room. And there was broad agreement at the outset on 3 principles, including client first. That was never in dispute. Secondly, full transparency. And the third issue that related to it was get rid of the bad actors, and I think that we've accomplished that today. When Bill Clinton asked me to take up the RSA issue for him, I immersed myself in the details, the retirement savings accounts. Remember that the Clinton proposal on the RSAs was in addition to Social Security. The Bush proposal was as a substitute for Social Security, and in that there's a huge difference. So as we began this discussion, I had some institutional knowledge. I was active in the opt-out provision, which I think has transformed retirement savings. In addition to which, I have the auto IRA proposal, which I think is continuing to gain traction. The other side told me at the conclusion of last year that they wanted to do it. The problem was the whole notion of the dispute centered on the mandate. Here's what we need to pay attention today to. Facts. Facts. 10,000 boomers retire every single day now in America. And if you couple the 10,000 retirements that we're witnessing every single day, square that with the following. Half the people that get up and go to work every single day in America are not in a qualified retirement plan. We all see what's coming down the road, and we need to prepare ourselves. Strengthening Social Security, personal savings, and I think the other reality that the Secretary spoke to that is something we have to pay great attention to, and it just goes as simply as this. We are now, for everybody that's here, in the midst of a defined contribution retirement plan, as opposed to the defined benefit plan that our parents grew up with a date certain of retirement, you receive that benefit. That is but a legacy today, and there are more people that walk away from those plans than embrace them. So I think that we're in a far better place today. 96 Democrats wrote to the Labor Department requesting input, and the Labor Department responded time and again to the request that we had. And I would pick up on what Nancy said and what Stenny said. We're not hearing any complaints from what we've accomplished. Now, obviously, everybody wants the perfect, but in this case, as I noted in my introductory remarks, we embrace the possible, and we've got a decent working fiduciary rule today.
Good morning, everyone. I am so proud to be a Democrat today. As the ranking member of the Financial Services Committee, I have the responsibility, working with my colleagues, to try and pay attention to consumer needs in this country. We created the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau under Dodd-Frank. And so we see a lot of loopholes in the law. We see a lot of fraud. We see a lot of instances where consumers are just forgotten, not paid attention to, not taken care of. And so, as we stand here today, in all that I have seen, the work that has been done, led by the Secretary of Labor, Secretary Perez, in cooperation with Nancy Pelosi, our leadership, and members of our caucus, is the finest work on behalf of consumers that we have been involved in. This resolution of disapproval that they're attempting today is shocking. How can, in the face of everything we have learned about financial advisors and how they are conflicted oftentimes and how they're not acting in the best interest of their clients, knowing all of this, how can they possibly say no to our seniors whose retirement savings are at risk? You heard Leader Pelosi say $17 billion every year is being lost in retirement savings because of conflicted advice. And so we're here, we are organized, we have been led by the best secretary in all of the administration on this issue. We know these facts. We understand it very well. We have stepped up to the plate to protect our consumers and our seniors. And despite the fact that the opposite side of the aisle does not agree with us, don't seem to care about these seniors, don't listen to the facts, we are firm in our conviction that we're going to continue this struggle no matter what it takes. And so I want to thank my colleagues. I want to thank Secretary Perez, Leader Pelosi, Hoyer, everybody for the fine work that we have done for our consumers and our seniors in particular. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to try not to be repetitive, but I want to emphasize that this only applies to retirement funds. Department of Labor only has jurisdiction over retirement funds, not general investments. And so what we're talking about are generally unsophisticated investors who all of a sudden have a nest egg that could easily be hundreds of thousands of dollars. Even modest income, if they started very early, invested consistently over 40 or 45 years, could easily approach $1 million. Now, if you'd been an investor and built up this by investing and trading and buying and selling over the years and had $1 million, that's one thing. But a lot of these people, this is all they've got, and it's all at once. You retire, here's your nest egg. Now, the opponents of this rule sound like they're saying that their business model won't work unless they can take advantage of these unsophisticated investors. And that's why we need the rule, so that they can't do that. The Department of Labor, for most of the investment advisors won't be affected at all because they put their client's interest first, and so they don't have anything to worry about. But the Department of Labor listened to all of the input. The original rule was withdrawn, the second rule was amended, and now we have a rule that is actually getting rave reviews from the industry, congratulating the Department of Labor for considering all of their ideas and making sure that the overall point of making sure that the best interest of the client is paramount, that is preserved. Some of the paperwork has been reduced, and they have a workable solution. This is where we need to be. We need to protect these people who retire. Used to be you could retire, and it's pointed out, you didn't have to worry about it. You just retire, calculate 1.5 times the number of years, average salary, and that's what you get. Now you have to make investment decisions, and if you make the wrong decisions, you may find that you outlive your investments. The investments lose value because you put it into the wrong investments. And investment advisors ought to do what's in the best interest of the investor, not what they can make the most money on. It's my pleasure now to turn the podium over to a person who has a strong background in the financial services industry, another gentleman from Maryland, John Delaney.
Lots of Marylanders here today. So, thanks to the leadership of the Secretary and his fine team at the Department, this rule is an example of the government doing precisely what it should do, which is identifying a problem and responding in a smart and thoughtful manner. We clearly have a looming retirement crisis in this country. People are living longer. The cost of retirement are much greater. We've shifted the risk of retirement from institutions to individuals, and it's been increasingly difficult for Americans to save for retirement because wages have not gone up. So the thought of Americans losing $17 billion a year, which amounts to 20% of their savings across their lifetime among all Americans, to conflicted investment advice is nonsensical and it's unconscionable. And that is why this rule is so appropriate and so smart, and why I applaud the Department of Labor for their actions. Our Republican colleagues allege that based on this rule, the industry will somehow not serve the average American any longer. Well, there's a few problems with that. The first is that's not what the industry has said. They've been very clear in their support and endorsement of the rule that they embrace the approach the Secretary's taken and are supportive of the direction of where the rule is going. Nowhere in those quotes do they talk about dropping millions of customers. The second thing is these institutions have invested enormous amounts of money in acquiring these customers. It's one of the biggest costs financial institutions have, is customer acquisition. Why in the world would they ever decide to suddenly drop all of these customers that they've invested so much in obtaining? They'll simply change their business practices, which many of them already have, by the way, to conform to this rule, which levels the playing field for all Americans. And if they don't, as we speak, there'll be entrepreneurs with investors in conference rooms working on whiteboards all around this country, coming up with new business models that conform to this rule, this high standard, fiduciary standard, which we've needed for a long time, and deliver financial products in an efficient manner. I don't know why you would ever bet against innovation in the United States of America, but that seems to be what our Republican colleagues are doing when they're saying the industry won't respond to this rule. So I couldn't be happier to be here to stand with my colleagues in support of this rule. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yes, one question for Leader Pelosi and another question for Secretary Perez. For Leader Pelosi, do you expect this will be a campaign issue? Are you urging your members to make this one?
Well, I certainly hope not. I hope that the Republicans will understand and see the light of day that this is an exercise in futility that they are taking up. There are people out there who are watching to see how Congress proceeds on this, but our intention was not, we wanted to win the issue, not to make it a political issue.
For Secretary Perez, it's been 3 weeks since the fiduciary rule has come out. There has not been a lawsuit. Do you think that as days goes on, do you think this lessens the chance that there will be a lawsuit against the rule?
Well, that's going to be up to someone else. I hope when they review the rule, they will come to the conclusion that they ought to declare victory because the rule is more streamlined as a result of their input. The rule is better as a result of the input. I always enter this enterprise with a healthy dose of humility, and they made us smarter and they made the rule better. And I've talked to so many folks in industry who have said, thank you for listening, and we can work with this. There's a few folks, many of whom came in early on and said, this is a solution in search of a problem. And that's a ridiculous proposition, quite frankly. So there may still be a few who want to persist, but I have a lot of optimism moving forward that we can continue to work and we'll work successfully. And if we get sued, we'll be ready for it, because you know what? Not only is the final product a very good product, but the process leading to the product was an impeccable process. And as a result, they don't have a legal leg to stand on in a lawsuit. So I'd rather have them spend their time on compliance rather than making it a full employment act for lawyers. But if they want to do that, we'll be ready.
I want to follow up on that because you ask is an election issue. What is an election issue is who's on their side, who's on the people's side, who wants to help the people. This rule says we want to make sure that the people have an advocate that is acting in their best interest. Why would anybody be against that? Richie Neal pointed that out. We all have an agreement on that. Are the Republicans offering this because they don't think we ought to be on their side, because we don't think the institutions ought to act in their best interest? And the reason I wanted to follow up on this is not unique. We have a crisis dealing with Zika, and we're going to walk away tomorrow without solving it. We have a crisis in Puerto Rico, and we're going to walk away tomorrow without solving it. We have a crisis in Flint, Michigan, and we're going to walk away tomorrow without addressing it. This rule is not addressing a real problem, the rule that is being offered to repeal it and reject the rule, to walk away from the American people. That certainly will be an election year issue.
Secretary Perez, I couldn't help but notice that this is a very good issue for a campaign, perhaps for a vice presidential. Do you have any interest in the job? Have you had those conversations in your time here on Capitol Hill?
You know, this is a very good issue for the average American, and that's what we do at the Department of Labor. We're the Department of Opportunity. We wake up every single day making sure that people have access to the pillars of the middle class, whether it's a good job that pays a fair wage, safe working conditions, access to a healthy and fair retirement, and that's what it's all about. And that's my focus every single day, and I got 268 days till the weekend, and I'm going to make sure I don't simply count the days, but we're going to make every day count, whether it's this, whether it's overtime, whether it's the implementation of silica dust, whether it's all the things that are part of building an opportunity society and addressing the angst that people feel every single day.
Mrs. Pelosi, would you make a good VP?
Well, let's get through the primary first, and we know that our next president, whoever she may be, will be thinking very thoughtfully about who the vice president will be. I always like to remind people that the rest of us are wondering what happens if this president, the vice president, has to take office. The person choosing is saying, how can I live with this person while I am in office? So that's a whole other dinner table discussion. Right now, we're focused on America's working families. Again, I salute Secretary Perez, my colleagues, Richie Neal and Mr. Delaney, Mr. Delaney coming from the private sector, understanding how decisions are made. Mr. Neal, who has worked on these issues for a very long time in the Congress, coming at this discussion in a very informed way. We all learn from them, and we're all very proud of the work of our caucus, and we salute the Secretary for that.
Congressman Neal, you have sponsored a bill with Roskin, rule. What did the final product do to address your concerns?
Well, there were a series of things, and I think proprietary interest was addressed. Also, the notion that you could sell your own products and the contract was going to be signed at the end of the process. That was a substantial part of what we were proposing, and the Secretary and the Labor Department responded to the request. And that's why a bit of surprise when you accomplish the goals that you set out to, why would we would be undertaking this proposal today is a bit of a surprise.
Quick follow-up on that. So have the issues in your legislation been resolved in the final?
One of the things that, again, one of the things I used to like about signing up for Congress, reporters covered process as well as the conflict. So the process has been satisfied. And the other, I think, key ingredient here that we want to pay some attention to today is that the response from the Labor Department was satisfactory. And yet, there's another key component here today, and the Secretary acknowledged that earlier at the caucus. There is still time for questions to be asked of the Secretary, and they will offer clarification. This is more than 1,000 pages. There's a lot of substance in here, and I think as it rolls out, there'll be a chance for people to continue to ask questions and therein find satisfaction or distress. But for the moment, I think that all of the questions that we raised, 96 Democrats signed the letter. By and large, they've been satisfied.
Would you still vote for that bill if Speaker Ryan brought it to the floor? Because he has.
No, I won't.
Thank you.